What is up, beautiful fish lovers, and welcome to another episode of Puff Daddy Reef. Today we are planting coral in the Red Sea Reef or 650 Peninsula. Before we get to the coral planting, I do want to talk a little bit about my max spec gyre. It was running in the pump. I basically circulate. I use the gyre flow left and right, clockwise, counterclockwise through the tank, and I heard a loud sound. It sounded like something was banging around in there. I think a snail or something got in. But I got to it a little bit late. Basically, this propeller got jammed and this part here basically got stripped. So I had to replace it. Fortunately, when you buy the gyre, you get an A side and a B side. So typically you have one backup propeller of everything if something like that happens. So I was able to swap it out. But for a few days, I didn't have a lot of flow, and the amount of detritus that built up on the bottom acrylic surface of this tank was pretty unbelievable. And it just reminded me why I went bare bottom with this tank. It's just one way to get that detritus out into the tank, up into the overflow, and then down into the filter socks. And I don't have to worry about sand or anything blowing around. So I got the pumps in there going really hard, trying to kick everything up and flush the system out. Might do a little bit of scrubbing, and I'll show you that. But let's get to the cool part. We're gonna plant some corals. I also am going to cut some rocks into some cool structures that I can just place around the tank. So we'll delay this video no longer and jump right into it. So today, in order to remove some of the barriers to planting corals and repositioning them, I'm actually going to make little islands of rocks that I can reposition throughout the tank. This also makes it a lot easier for me to clean the tank because I can move the rocks out of the way and scrub the bottom. This is going to be a relatively small island, and I will show you how to slice off the bottom to make it nice and flat. What I'll be using here is this bandsaw. I'll be using a metal type blade for it. You want very, very thin teeth on the blades in order to cut through the rock. Basically, sorry, not thin, but small teeth. The smaller the teeth, the better. And it will just slice through it. This rock is very porous and not super dense. So I'll show you how it works, and we'll get it in the tank. So then you have a flat surface for your rock like so. And one thing that you can do if you're worried about it scratching your tank, or in my case the acrylic on the bottom, then you can add some basically epoxy putty to kind of smooth this area out and make it a little flatter. That's what I did with some previous rocks. So there we go. I just reached into my skimmer, pulled out this. Yuck. I'm taking care of a ton of maintenance. I just cleaned out my skimmer, and now I am replacing the carbon and GFO from the reactor. I generally do 2 cups of carbon, 1 cup of GFO, but now I'm just putting a lot more carbon than GFO. Don't necessarily want to suck all the phosphates out of this tank, but I do want to get some just to make up for what's going to be leaching out some of the rocks. This is why I absolutely love having this acrylic base on the bottom of my tank. I can just get my flipper scraper and scrape off anything that's unsightly. Now the bottom of the tank's clean and I just have a storm of stuff floating around. So I'm gonna do what I can to try to suck all of that out. The tank looks good, we got it cleaned up. Now it's time to frag some corals. I'm going to do two types of fragging here. I'm going to do some fragging where I'm actually creating some frags just to maybe sell or swap later, so I'll be doing that with my pectina coral. And then I'll also just be cutting up some of the coral, the bigger colonies, because I want to place small sub-colonies different places. A lot of people, when they get corals for the reef aquarium, they'll take if they get a big colony, they'll only put it in one location. But for those ones, I'm going to kind of mix them around. I don't see any problem having the same type of coral in multiple locations. It's a good way to kind of see what type of flow and what type of lighting the coral likes. So what I have here is a acropora colony, and this is a colony that wasn't doing too hot in another tank, so I picked it up and it's had a little bit difficulty adjusting to the light, but it seems pretty healthy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to frag it so I can put some frags in different locations of the tank. This is my big box of frag supplies, supplies that I like to have when I'm doing fragging for coral. I really like to have some accelerant for the super glue. This works really good, and it reduces the amount of time that you have something that you have to hold on to. For glue, we'll be using this this gel super glue, and I prefer this over the tubes, the metal tubes, because those, I don't know, they kind of get scrunched up and hard. It's totally up to you. You can probably get a little bit more out of here, but I found if I shake this, I can get quite a lot. And so I'm going to use my fragging kit to basically cut off a couple of pieces of that, put them on frag plugs so I can set those aside for later, see how they grow out. And for that, I'll be using these bone shears. And then I'm just going to snip a couple larger pieces off, and those I'll put somewhere in the tank. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to fill this tub up with a little bit of water, so after the frag is glued, I can set it in there. Coral is fine being out of the water for a short period of time, but you do want to keep it in the water, and because these are pretty low volumes, I want to move pretty quick. Once I'm done fragging this, I will get fresh water, and then I'll bring out my pectina. So I'm going to take the coral colony. One great thing about acropora is it's really easy to frag. You can just snip off branches and find out where they're connected, and you'll have a piece. So I'm going to show you what I did here. I took the this tall rock that I cut and kind of placed it here in the corner. Let me know if you like that or not. It does make it a little less open, but it is kind of cool. I can definitely put some very neat corals up very close and look at them. The anemone fell off that rock. I also had placed that at the base, and now it's just stuck on the bottom, and the maroonfish is absolutely loving him. I made this little island just for some corals to see how that looks. I think in the future I'll definitely make some more of those and just cover them with zoas. One of the frags from the pectina I cut off and placed in the tank, so that should be another cool pectina growing out. And this strawberry shortcake colony that's doing okay. Maybe it's a little too bright light. We kind of glued him there, but there's little frags of him all over the place, so we'll have to see which one does good. Down here, we've got this purple softy coral and a type of bird's nest. On this rock, we've got the green slimer, we've got my peacock tenuis, and we have the big red montipora that's doing pretty good. In the back there, we have a small bird's nest. And then this rock here is kind of slow in the flow. Might be a little too much flow for this large polyp stony coral, this gold torch coral, or it looks like it's actually a type of hammered coral, this gold hammered coral, but almost looks like a torch coral. Just might be a little too much flow for it with the jar, so I might have to move that. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Puff Daddy Reef. We sliced the bottoms off some rocks, I cleaned the tank, and I also bit the bullet and finally planted a bunch of the coral in the tank. I also moved my frag rack down below, so I'll let you know how that goes, but the fish down there are probably enjoying that a lot. So I'll leave you with some final shots of the tank. Because I did so much cleaning and scraping, it is a little bit cloudy, but this is not a persistent type of cloud, so this should clear up. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.